Exposed, 12 sinister and spine-chilling horrific accidents that haunt the unexplained. The calm streets of Maplewood shattered with terror. One evening, a house engulfed in flames captured the sleepy town, revealing the grim fate of its longtime residents. The empty playground, haunted by laughter, now echoed whispers of fear. A young couple, well-loved in the community, met their end in a freak accident involving a car that inexplicably swerved off the road, leaving behind shattered glass that glistened menacingly in the moonlight. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Whispers of strange occurrences slithered through the neighborhood like a serpent in the grass as Sarah served coffee and checked on tables at the diner. Her heart raced with uneasy anticipation. She listened and watched, trying to ignore the chilling headlines that had become fodder for local gossip. Everything around her felt charged with an unspoken dread. Just outside the diner, the wind howled through the limbs of the stately trees, their shadows dancing menacingly on the ground. Each clink of silverware felt like a countdown, punctuating her anxiety. Then the sirens. Loud and furious, they ripped through the air, leaving her cold. She didn't need to look outside to know who the sirens were for. Mrs. Hill, the kind-hearted widow next door, had been taken by the dark. In a moment of disbelief, she could almost see the shadows gather, grinning like wolves circling their prey. The horror spread rapidly, igniting fears buried deep within her. The very fabric of Maplewood began to shift. Strange sounds invaded the serenity of evenings, rustling from the woods behind her house, whispers creeping through the leaves, shadows darting past the streetlight. Sarah's skin prickled with a tension she couldn't shake. She found her heart thumping harder at every flicker in the darkness. Whenever she'd wrap her arms around Lucy and Jake at night, the feeling of safety was undercut by the silence that felt more like a warning than a comfort. Officer Mills rolled in like a beacon of false hope, claiming to have solved the latest mystery. As the community gathered around him, his rehearsed words fell flat, the trust unraveling in Sarah's gut. She felt it. There was something he wasn't saying. Suddenly, tragedy struck again. Lucy, with her bright smile, barely escaped the violent grip of a cloaked figure in broad daylight. Sarah's heart plummeted. She had thought the shadows were her imagination. But now? They were real, lurking in plain sight. Her trust in their safety fractured. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue as Sarah dug deeper into Maplewood's haunting past. Following the traces of the school with its shattered windows, she felt paranoia tighten like a cold grip around her throat. The more she uncovered, the more shadows loomed over her friendships. Every clue danced temptingly close to horror, each discovery pulling her deeper into the abyss. Then the crashing sound shattered her resolve. It echoed through the night like a brutal warning. Sarah's breath grew shallow. Over the tension of silence, an icy voice threaded its way to her ears, dark and malevolent. You should have never looked too closely. And in that moment, she understood they were all entangled in a web of deception, drawn to the weeknight horrors more than the charm that once defined Maplewood. The darkness settled thick over Maplewood, stifling and heavy. Sarah could feel it wrapping around her like a vice, squeezing ever tighter as she drove home. The flickering streetlights cast an eerie glow, revealing twisted shadows that stretched and recoiled with every gust of wind. She gripped the steering wheel harder, heart racing, replaying the words of that voice in her head, its icy chill lingering long after it had vanished. You should have never looked too closely. Those words echoed in her mind, twisting her stomach into knots. Panic clawed at her throat as she recalled the faces of her friends. Lucy looked so fragile, her laughter haunted by terror now. Jake, so full of life. Sarah couldn't shake the image of him staring at the cloaked figure with wide, terrified eyes. Fighting the urge to scream, she pulled into her driveway, her home looking less like a sanctuary and more like a prison with each passing moment. Inside, she rushed to switch on every light. Instantly, the shadows retreated under the fist of electric light, but the comfort was fleeting. The world beyond the windows was alive with sinister whispers, unseen forces pressing against the glass like breath on a winter morning. "Mom!" Jake's small voice broke through her spiraling thoughts as he dashed into the living room, clutching Lucy's hand tightly. The two children looked like pale ghosts against the bright walls, eyes wide and frightened. "Shoo, it's okay," she soothed, crouching to meet their fearful gazes. "It's just the wind. The storm's coming soon." But deep down, she knew it wasn't just the wind. It was more than that. The air was thick with the unshakable dread that had begun to cloak this town. Late that night, sleep eluded Sarah. She tossed and turned, visions of shadowy figures tearing through her thoughts like a wild beast unleashed. Each creak of the house seemed amplified, the howl of the wind a mournful warning in her ears. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her into a restless slumber, and then came the dreams. Vivid and violent, they pulled her into a fractured past, a time before Maplewood's quaint facade hid the true terrors lying in wait. She saw the old schoolhouse, its windows shattered, and the laughter of children twisted into cries. A burning fire blazed in the heart of the hall, illuminating ghostly figures that moved with unnatural grace, circling, watching, waiting. Their faces twisted in agony, mouths open wide as if screaming without sound. Just as one reached for her, she jolted upright, gasping for breath, heart thundering in her chest. But it wasn't just a nightmare. The sounds from outside crept into her bedroom, faint whispers mingled with the rustling of the trees. She stepped out into the hallway, her instincts screaming for her to stay put. The air was unnaturally still as she crept towards the children's room. Jake sat up, wide-eyed, a beacon of terror. "Mom," I heard whispering. "The shadows are back." Her body tensed. Silent, she moved into the children's room. As she opened the door, the icy breath of the hallway chilled her to the bone. "What did you hear, honey?" she whispered, hoping to dismiss their fears. "They said they want us." Lucy curled closer to her brother, trembling. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to shift, elongating as if to answer in the language of dread. Sarah swallowed hard, too aware of the weight in the air. It felt heavy, clinging like a stain to hope. "Stay close to me," she urged, pulling both children against her. But it was too late. Something was in the room with them, lurking just beyond the light. The growling echoed softly, a low, terrifying sound. It was coming closer. And in that moment, Sarah realized she had awakened something far worse than she ever imagined. What did they want from her? And as the room darkened further, a single chilling thought pierced through: the shadows weren't just looking for them, they were waiting. She braced herself, desperately searching for a way to protect them. But how could she fight what she couldn't even see? Because in Maplewood, the safety she once knew flickered and faded like the dying light of day. As a heavy knock echoed from the front door, fear coursed through her veins. Who or what would be standing on the threshold this time? The knock jolted Sarah to her core, echoing through the tight confines of the room like a funeral bell. Instantly, Jake squeezed her hand tighter, a whimper barely escaping his lips. Lucy buried her face against her brother, her petite frame shaking. "Stay here," Sarah whispered, barely able to trust her own voice. She released them slowly, her heart racing as she moved cautiously toward the front door. Each step felt like a betrayal to her instincts, as if she were walking toward an ominous fate. Another knock came, sharper, more insistent. The sound thrummed in her ears, drowning out every rational thought. The children huddled close, fear palpable in their wide eyes that stared at her with unyielding trust. "Mom, don't open it." Jake's voice rose in pitch, a plea tinged with desperation. She halted, glancing back at them, wishing she could assure them that everything would be all right. But in that moment, those very words felt like a lie. What lay on the other side? Should she dare to find out, or would ignorance be their salvation? The shadows loomed closer, slipping beneath the edges of the light as if sensing the turmoil within her. Maybe it's the police, she suggested, now gripping the doorknob. The mundane thought felt absurd against the dark weight pressing down on her. The police never came to Maplewood. Not anymore. With a trembling breath, she pulled the door open, expecting the worst. Instead, the night greeted her with a silence that nearly choked. The porch light spilled its glow against a solitary figure. He stood cloaked, features obscured by shadow. "Help me," he croaked, voice raspy and hollow. Panic bubbled in Sarah's throat, choking her. The figure took a step forward. She swallowed hard, heart thudding so loudly she feared it might burst. "Who are you?" she demanded, urgency masking her fear. "I need," the figure gasped, clutching at what looked like a tattered letter. "You have to listen." The faint wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the distant echo of laughter, twisted and mocking. An unseen force twisted around Sarah's gut, and she felt herself draw back. "Stay back!" she shouted, a protective instinct coursing through her. Yet the words fell prey to the shadows creeping closer. The figure remained frozen, his eyes pleading from beneath the hood. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the depths of the night. It slices through her like a knife. Was it Lucy? Jake? No. She turned, desperation surging as she rushed back into the house. She yanked the door closed hard enough to rattle the frame, the breath of cold night air biting at her skin. The knock came again, no longer a polite request but an angry fist. "Let me in," the voice demanded, transforming into something guttural and twisted. The lights flickered, each surge making the shadows shift angrily across the room. Bursting into her children's room, she found them standing, frozen in place, the darkness pooling around their feet. The whispers grew louder, surrounding them like an unseen crowd. "Mom, they're back." "The shadows!" Jake cried, pointing toward the corner where the dark mass was gathering. "Close your eyes," Sarah screamed, drawing them close. But it was too late. The darkness surged forward, tendrils snaking toward her children like the arms of a suffocating nightmare. The figure outside wailed, its plea a chorus of pain that wrapped around Sarah's heart, tearing at her sanity. "Don't look!" she shouted, heart racing with fear and rage. They all turned, trembling now, hearts pounding in unison. But in that moment of unity, something shifted. A new voice rose from the shadows, a deeper growl that resonated throughout the house. "You belong to us." As the shadows lunged, Sarah felt an icy grip form around her throat, constricting. What did they want? Her heart raced as she fought to break free from despairing panic. But time was running out. "Mom?" Jake's innocent voice pierced the air, shaking. With a shuddering breath, propelled by sheer desperation, she had to make a choice. Could she fight whatever terror awaited her? Could she save her children before the shadows consumed them all? And just then, from the depths of the darkness came a flicker of hope, a memory that whispered like a ghost. Maybe there's a way. But before she could grasp it, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, a symphony of dread, pulling her deeper into the abyss. Could she discover the truth behind the lurking darkness before it closed in on them all? Or was Maplewood's fate sealed with every breath she took? The shadows screamed their hunger as they surged forward, their forms twisting and writhing like restless spirits. Sarah's instincts kicked in, each heartbeat pounding a desperate rhythm that urged her to protect her children at any cost. She grasped their shoulders, yanking them closer, as if her grip could shield them from the monstrous darkness curling around them. "Hold on to me," she cried, eyes darting as the whispers morphed into shrill taunts, scratching at her sanity. Jake and Lucy clung to her, but she could feel their fear mingling with her own. Sweat dripped down her back, pooling at her waist, the oppressive heat of dread clinging like a second skin. "Mom, I can't see." "They're coming," Jake wailed, his voice pitched higher, every syllable a plea for safety. Sarah steeled herself, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We need to get out. Now." But the air felt thick with an unnatural weight, as if the very atmosphere conspired against her. "Mom!" Lucy shrieked, her little hands balled into fists, pulling against Sarah's hold as the shadows closed in, curling deeper into the room with malicious intent. The dark mass shifted and elongated, forming into grotesque shapes that barely resembled human figures, their eyes aglow with a sickening light. "I can't let them take you!" Sarah shouted, urgency pouring through her veins. She turned ready to bolt for the makeshift barricade on the window when something cold brushed against her skin, sending icy tingles through her limbs. The whispers turned into laughter, soft, chilling. "Let them come." A haunting voice echoed from the shadows, confident, mocking. It was not just a threat but a promise, chilling her blood. She felt the pull of the shadows growing stronger, their presence solidifying as they swarmed to surround her family. In a moment of choice, she remembered the memory that danced just beyond reach. It was something about a story, a tale passed down, spoken in hushed tones. The dark entities revered fear, and fear could be harnessed into power. "Look!" She spat out the first words she could think of, fueled by half-remembered lore. "You want to take us? You need our fear. You want to play with shadows, play lies." Silence struck, cutting through the cacophony. The shadows paused, reforming and writhing as if caught in confusion. The icy grip around her throat loosened slightly, a momentary reprieve. She felt a swell of courage. "Feel this!" Sarah shouted with all her might, turning to face the twisting entities. "You might think you can instill fear, but we will not give you that satisfaction." The laughter ebbed, uncertainty creeping into the darkness. The shadows shifted their form, becoming more tangible, as if challenged by her defiance. But darkness does not back down easily, and their icy hostility quickly returned, creeping along the edges of the room, filling the space with stinging dread. With fresh resolve, she faced her children. "We can fight together. Close your eyes," she urged, channeling every ounce of strength to shield them. But as she gathered her will, a sharp gust of air swept through the house, extinguishing what little light they had. The room fell into pitch black, swallowing their figures whole, and the increased sexual tension of the shadows coiled tighter around them. Then she felt it, a sinister presence closing in, creeping up her spine, overwhelming her senses. "Mom, help!" Lucy's voice trembled like a flickering flame. At that moment, Sarah knew she needed a plan. Something to push back against the encroaching dread. She had to find the source of this darkness, uncover whatever secret tied it to Maplewood, and push it back, or they would never escape its grasp. "Listen to me," she shouted again. "Sit tight. We can defeat this." With the echoes of her children's whispers lingering in the air, Sarah moved forward into the darkness, guided by sheer will. The shadows responded, pressing closer, eager to recapture the fear they've tasted before. And then she remembered that whispered memory at the back of her mind. An old journal, dusty and hidden. Beneath their floorboards, spoke of names and rituals, places where shadows could be banished. "Let there be light." She yelled into the darkness, desperately plunging into the unknown. The shadows hissed at her defiance. But what price would she pay to free her children from this nightmare? Would the truth shatter their already fragile reality? Only time would reveal the terror awaiting them, as the darkness howled back. As she stepped into the inky void, a question burned in her heart: what ancient force had locked itself in Maplewood, and could she break its hold before it stole her family away? Sarah plunged deeper into the oppressive darkness, her heart racing as whispers swirled around her, brushing against her ears like gnarled fingertips. Each beat felt like a countdown, a grim reminder that time was slipping away. The shadows seemed to congeal and writhe, shifting shapes darting in her peripheral vision, daring her to falter. "Stay close," she urged, her voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the shrouded panic. The children squeezed tighter against her, their small bodies quaking against her side, but she sensed they were still with her. As she forged ahead, she recalled the journal, the faded ink, the frayed edges of its binding. The feeling of it in her hands just hours earlier, the fragile connection to something bigger. She needed to remember the words. She needed to. Mom. Jake's voice, barely above a whisper, clawed at her focus. I'm here. She snapped, frustration laced with fear. Just keep your eyes shut. But the stake of her command wasn't confident anymore. Fear seeped into her resolve with every breath drawn. The shadows sensed it. They hissed and slithered closer, mocking her. Sarah felt the inevitable weight of despair pressing down on her shoulders. Suddenly, a piercing chill gripped her lungs. She gasped, the cold air surging through her, leaving her breathless. The temperature seemed to drop even further, distorting time. Goosebumps erupted across her skin. She could almost feel the gnawing mouths of the shadows inching just behind her. Quickly think. Her mind raced. The words from the journal flashed in her memory, fragmented but urgent. Names, powers, something about a light that could push back the darkness. A ritual to call upon the spirits of light. Was she brave enough to conjure such a force? Focus. She urged herself, grasping for the edge of desperation. She needed to anchor her thoughts. Sarah. Another deep, reverberating voice echoed in the blackness. It was husky and filled with the weight of 1,000 shadows. You think you can defy us? The darkness writhed in response, and she felt it, an ancient hunger stirring like a beast awakening from deep slumber. The shadows shifted, forming into twisted faces that mirrored her deepest fears. She forced herself not to look, to remember there was no power in fear. Feel this. Sarah shouted again, fighting to push through the crackling dread. You thrive on fear, but we won't give that to you. We will share our light. The shadows hesitated. With their uncertainty, a small, flickering ember ignited in Sarah's chest. She closed her eyes tightly, willing the warmth to flow out of her, to envelop her children in a caring embrace. She needed to believe the light would show them the way. Murmurs arose, shadows recoiling loosely as if startled by her defiance. It was now or never. I know you, dark spirits. She screamed, holding on to her children. You're scared of the light. You can't survive without our fear. With a sudden rush, the shadows rushed forward, attempting to tear apart her confidence. Laughter filled the air, a cacophony of mockery, but beneath it lay a distinct echo of doubt. Give us what we crave. No. She roared, her own will combining with an ancient strength. I refuse. In that moment, visions of the journal surged through her consciousness. The words of invocation hung on her lips, ready to explode into the void. With her heart racing, she pushed out what she remembered. Lumen illuminate. Shadows recede. Light binds you. The air crackled as she chanted, urgency building into sheer determination. Burning warmth flooded the darkness around her. But was it enough? Would the light break the thrall of the shadows, or would it only deepen their hunger, drawing them closer to the family she fought to protect? Suddenly, the voices grew louder, the shadows convulsed violently, and Sarah realized she was at the brink of something far more malevolent than she could have anticipated. In agony, she struggled against the shadows grasping at her ankles, the laughter growing louder again. The darkness will claim you, Sarah, and all you hold dear. As the last whispers echoed, Sarah locked eyes with her children, determination flickering in love. What lay ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but she could not back down. Hold on. She yelled into the crashing darkness. We will find the light together. As laughter howled and swallowed her words, she braced for the moment where truth met darkness. What truly lay in the heart of Maplewood would decide their fate within the layers of betrayal and fear. The shadows swirled around them, more aggressive now, teeth gnashing in the void. Sarah could feel their cold breath brushing against her skin, lurking just out of reach. The warmth she felt when invoking the words from the journal flickered dangerously low, leaving her vulnerable. "Mom, it's too dark." Jake whimpered, his voice shaking. The fear in his tone almost pulled her down, like a lead weight. "I know," she shouted, fighting to keep hold of her own terror. "But if we don't keep pushing, they'll take us. They want us to be afraid." The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, a menacing pulse resonating from the shadows. It was as if the earth was aware of their dread and was trembling at the thought of the darkness consuming them. "Lumen illuminate. Shadows recede." She shouted again, desperation boiling over. She felt something within her flickering like a flame, and it surged as she clung to it harder. "We will not be claimed." Suddenly, there was a crack, sharp as a whip. The ground exploded in a fissure of darkness, sending ripples through the very air around them. A figure emerged from the depths, a silhouette twisted and dreadful. It held a lantern, but the light it cast was sickly green and burned into Sarah's eyes like acid. "Foolish woman!" it howled, the voice throbbing with agony and fury. "You think you summon the light? You are a mere echo in this abyss." Sarah's heart raced as the realization hit her. This creature wasn't merely seeking fear, it thrived on hope as well, twisting the feeling into a weapon. Every word clawed at her, attempting to eradicate her resolve. It was feeding off their fight, drawing strength from their struggle for survival. "Mom!" Maddie cried, clutching her brother tightly. "What do we do?" A split-second hesitation pierced through Sarah. Doubt bled in, threatening to unravel everything she had built. I don't know," she admitted, but she couldn't let her children see her crumble. Just then, the laughter of shadows broke through the darkness. They mocked her, jeering and howling with sinister delight. Each sound was like ice dripped into her veins. "Surrender to us. We are what you fear most. Your light will only dim, and when it does, you will belong to us." "No!" Sarah roared, drawing strength from within. She pressed against the suffocating blackness surrounding her. "We are stronger than you. I will protect my children, even if it kills me." With every ounce of will, she reached for the embers flickering in her chest, forcing them to grow. Light burst from her fingertips, a tiny beacon shining brightly against the overwhelming tide of darkness. The shadows screamed, recoiling as the heat spread. But it was only a moment, just a flash. Like a momentary spark before it was swallowed by despair once more, the gnarled figure lurched forward, almost within reach. Its hand grasped the air, tendrils of shadow coiling around, trying to pull them in. Sarah could almost catch a glimpse of the blackened souls trapped behind the creature's hollow eyes, forever tethered to the darkness. Would they succumb as well? "What lurks in the silence is worse than what screams for your attention," it whispered, its voice carrying the weight of heavy losses. "You cannot escape the ending that awaits you." "No!" Sarah screamed, finding her voice again. "We will not be prisoners of your nightmares." The shadows surged, crashing against her light. The ground trembled as she fought against the encroaching darkness, and in that moment, she felt a surge of unity and almost desperate connection with the hope she'd ignited. A heartbeat of defiance resonated with her children, they were together. "Let us combine our voices," Sarah shouted, pulling her children close. Together, her children whispered, each syllable a hesitant echo of their mother's conviction. In the heart of Maplewood, the battle raged, uncertainty clawing at them. But as shadows clashed with the flickering flames of hope, they had only one chance. "Now!" Sarah commanded, her eyes blazing with defiance. They spoke the words together. "Lumen illuminate. Shadows recede." As their voices crescendoed, the darkness quivered, but at what cost? Would the shadows surrender to their light, or was there an unseen force still lurking, ready to unleash something worse? The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The ground trembled again, as if something below was awakening. Something ancient, and in that pregnant pause, Sarah felt dread wash over, an ominous warning that whatever lay ahead would either free them, or drag them deeper into the abyss. They shouted in unison, the light radiating from their clasped hands casting elongated shadows that danced dangerously along the edge of darkness. But the shadows didn't retreat, they recoiled momentarily, only to surge back with ferocity, as if testing the strength of their combined will. "Stay close," Sarah ordered, panic igniting her words. She could feel the ground vibrating beneath her feet, like the rumble of a locomotive charging toward them. Suddenly, a deafening crack rattled through the air. A fissure split the earth, exhaling a gust of frigid air that stung Sarah's face. The children huddled closer, hearts racing in sync with the vibrations of the ground. "What is happening?" Jake whimpered, eyes wide. "Listen to me," Sarah shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. "We need to." An anguished scream erupted from deep within the chasm. It clawed at her heart, a sound drenched in despair. It paralyzed her. Who had it come from? Someone trapped? Or something? Shadows curled eagerly around the mouth of the abyss, tugging at the edges. This was no mere game. Lives hung in the balance. "Mom!" Maddie screamed, pulling at Sarah's arm. "It's getting closer." A piercing howl erupted, reverberating through the dense darkness. The gnarled figure returned, eyes blazing with the intense green light of its lantern. "You think you can fight me?" Its voice cut through them like a knife, leaving Sarah breathless with its malevolence. "I will feast on your fear. You can't outrun the darkness." She tightened her grip around her children, their fingers lacing together like a fragile thread of hope. She could not allow the shadows to unwound them. "Even your despair feeds me," it continued, shadows pooling thickly around it. "Your light cannot penetrate these depths." Sarah's heart raced as she felt the flickers of warmth from her children wavering. They were losing ground. They needed another push. "Focus," she urged. "Breathe. Together." Her command hung in the air, heavy and dense, carving a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. With each inhale, she felt the warmth of their connection swell a defiant flicker in the cold depths of their despair. They had to remember that fear was only as powerful as they let it be. "Now," she encouraged, her voice dropping an octave, filled with an eerie calm. "We must summon the light again. Think of the places we love. Think of home." Maddie squeezed Jake's hand tighter. "I remember the park, yes," Sarah interjected, cutting through the shadowy laughter. "Feel the warmth of the sun. Let it guide you." They focused, gathering strength like a spring ready to uncoil. Light ignited again from their hands, but this time, it burgeoned with an intensity that made the shadows scream. The green glow of the lantern faltered slightly, pulsing with menace, but just as they began to feel the tides shift in their favor, the whispers turned savage. "You think you can hold on to that warmth forever?" The figure surged forward, reaching, ever reaching. "You cannot escape your fate." The lantern flickered, casting grotesque shapes on the walls of the encroaching darkness. It was a flash of 100 anguish-filled faces, mouths agape in silent screams. Sarah's breath hitched, as dread continued to claw at her insides. They weren't just fighting against shadows, they were facing a history of torment. "Keep the light burning," she yelled, though it felt like the words alone were not enough now. The shadows began to wrap around the edges of their brightness. And in the center of it all, the ground heaved violently, swallowing the space between them and the swirling darkness. It was threatening to pull them under, and they would have to decide in an instant, fight or fall back. "Ready again?" she whispered, but there was a crack in the confidence she tried to project. Would they be strong enough? With uncertainty, qualm and breathless fear, they spoke, forming a fragile alliance, their spoken words barely keeping the darkness at bay. But what if the darker force absorbed this moment of light? What if this alliance fell apart? There's something waiting in the silence. Sarah muttered, an inkling of dread creeping back. What do we do if it's not just shadows? The walls shimmered and twisted around them, the glint of distorted eyes stealing the breath from their lungs. And then they saw it, peering through, a shape forming behind the curtain of dark, something far worse than the shadows, something ancient. Something that had awakened. What would they find when they turned around? The air thickened, an oppressive weight pressing down on them. Shadows shifted, swaying as if teasing the edges of their flickering light. Sarah's heart raced, every pulse an echo of fear. The shape behind the darkness grew clearer, expanding, blocking out the hollow glow of hope they held dear. "It's coming," Jake whispered, his voice shaky, glancing from Sarah to his sister and back. "Just focus." Sarah shouted, her voice strained yet defiant. "Think of the park, the swings. We can't let it take that from us." But as they anchored their minds to bright memories, the twisted figure stepped closer, revealing gnarled limbs and a face that was a tapestry of longing and despair. The creature's eyes glowed with an agonizing light, a mirror of the depths they hadn't dared to explore. It spoke again, voice slithering through the air like smoke. "You run from truth, only to wind up here, with me. You can't escape what is. You can't fight your own shadows." The ground trembled, and the fissure widened, sending tremors through the air. Maddie stumbled, gripping Jake's hand tighter. They were teetering on the edge of the abyss, darkness yawning below like an insatiable maw, hungry for their fear. Terror washed over Sarah like ice water, the cold creeping into her bones. "We are not afraid," she shouted, but doubt gnawed at her. Could they really stand against this? "Mom, what's that?" Maddie pointed, her voice barely above a whisper. In a dark corner, figures shifted, lingering on the periphery. Faces from nightmares danced in the periphery, haunting and pleading. They opened their mouths, but no sound came forth, just a cacophony of silent screams that filled the chasm around them. "Stay together," Sarah barked, maneuvering her children to shield them from the nightmarish sight. Yet deep down, she felt an urge to turn and run, to flee from this horrifying reality. "Can't we just go home?" Jake whimpered, tears pooling in his eyes. "No," Sarah snapped, adrenaline clawing at her senses. "Look. We have to face it. If we turn our backs now," the thought of exposing her children to that inevitable darkness was incomprehensible. "Together," Maddie cried, her spirit buoying faintly against the overwhelming dread. The crack of light flared brighter in their clasped hands. But the shadows consuming them were relentless. Sarah could feel them gnawing at her resolve, fraying the edges of her strength. "Keep holding on," she demanded, squeezing their hands tightly. "And if we fail?" Jake's small voice trembled, breaking her fierce facade. "We won," she said, but she felt the tremor in her words. What if this was a lie they told themselves to fend off despair? "Can you feel it?" The figure hissed, inching closer, its grin slicing the darkness. "The dread that knows you, the fear that lives inside you. You think this light protects you, but your own hearts betray you." The shadows surged, swelling around them like a creeping disease. Fingers of dread reached up from the chasm, tugging at their ankles, pulling at their resolve. The brightness flickered dangerously, shadows clawing hungrily at their connection. "No. Together," Maddie screamed, summoning the last of her courage and forcing the light to surge once more. The warmth surged, illuminating the shadows momentarily, a sharp expulsion of brilliance pushing back against the tidal wave of darkness, but sudden silence fell, and with it a shiver crested. The faces distorted as the screeching whispers faded. A pause. Sarah didn't trust it. "What's happening?" she asked, her eyes wide as she scanned the horizon of darkness. And in that stillness, that throbbing, aching quiet, they saw it. The gnarled entity faltered, shifting almost listlessly. "You think the end is near?" It rasped, a mocking lilt threading through its voice. This is merely the beginning. You will wish for the shadows. Run! Sarah screamed, her voice breaking the tension, but too late the darkness pulsed, and with a hiss, everything around them tightened. The walls of shadow began to collapse inward again. The ground shook, more violently this time. The fissure threatened to consume them. Hold on. But the dark entity laughed, a sound bitter and chilling. You know what lies beneath and it's coming for you. Sarah turned to her children, their fear reflecting in her own eyes, and realized the truth of their situation was steadily unraveling into something worse than she could have imagined. What was truly lurking beneath the surface of their fear? What had they awakened? As they braced for whatever was next, an echoing footfall resonated through the chasm, near, impossibly close, shaking the ground around them. Get ready, she whispered, her heart racing. What would they face this time? The shadows closed in, dark fingers stretching, clawing like the desperate hands of lost souls. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the footfall grew louder, reverberating through the pit. Panic flared in her chest. She had a fleeting, dread-filled thought: what if it wasn't just the figure? What if something else was coming too? Stay together, Sarah urged, gripping her children's hands as if she were anchoring them to reality. The warmth of their small palms felt fleeting, like a weak flame in the biting cold of the dark. Jake's wide eyes darted around, and Maddie clung to her brother, trembling. Mom! I don't want to, I'm scared, she whimpered, her voice quaking. I know. Sarah reassured, but the urgency in her voice masked her own fear. How could she protect them if she couldn't even protect herself? Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. Then came that dreadful whisper, curling around them like smoke. Breathe deep, children. You are ripe for the picking. The darkness knows your fears, and soon, it will feast. Shut up. Sarah screamed defiantly, and yet her voice echoed uselessly, swallowed by the gaping maw of the darkness. The trepidation slithered over her skin, chilling her blood. She could feel it, the weight of despair pressing against her, the suffocating insistence that they could not win. With a sudden unearthly roar, the figure lunged forward, shooting out a hand that grasped the air as if longing to snag them. They flinched, but there was no escape. The shadows surged forth, and as the cold darkness enveloped them, Sarah screamed, "No! We won't let you take us." In that moment, a bright light flared, a radiant explosion in a sea of despair. Maddie, trembling, squeezed her brother's hand tighter. "Mom!" she shouted, her tiny, brave voice somehow cutting through the terror. "Laszlo! The toy! Laszlo?" Sarah's heart dropped as her mind flickered through memories, a small, worn-out toy they had carried along for comfort. In the chaos, it had slipped from her pocket, lost somewhere in the Shadowlands. Where? Sarah gasped as the shadows slithered closer. "Where is it, honey?" "In the park." Jake replied, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "It's in Mom's bag. The light, if we can just get there. Then we have to fight," Sarah urged, hope igniting, if only briefly. "Together." But preceding their last rally, the creature let out a ghastly laugh. "You think this will do? You are nothing. This is only the beginning," it sneered, eyes flashing with malevolence and delight. "You should wish for the shadows now, children." The ground shook, the fissure beneath them yawning wider, revealing a gnashing abyss. Tendrils of darkness snaked closer, their edges glowing with an intense fury. With dread crawling across her skin, Sarah tightened her grip, the warmth of her children almost a lifeline. "Come on. We can do this," she yelled, pushing against the overwhelming force, twisting the grip of darkness that threatened to pull them under. "Maddie, Jake, stay focused on the park." And then it struck Ellen, a blinding realization. There has to be a way to turn it back. To change the shadows. With renewed urgency, Echoes of their past games filled her mind, their carefree laughter blending with the panic. She remembered how they used to play hide and seek, how laughing hard could flip even the darkest moment. Think about the park. Sarah commanded with fervor. Remember the joy. The sunlight. It's all still in there, waiting for us. The shadows hesitated for a fraction of a second, faltering against the flood of light that surged from their collective memories. The moment snapped like a twig beneath their feet. Everything seemed to hang in the air, their breaths synchronized as they faced the creature. Would courage win over despair? But before the struggle could escalate, something deeper, darker began to rise from the depths, a seething presence that made the shadows seem like mere whispers. A growl, guttural and low, echoed through the darkness like the rumble of thunder before a storm. "What is that?" Jake exclaimed, eyes wide with terror. Maddie shivered, looking up at her mother. "Mom, I don't think it's just the shadows." Before she could respond, a massive shape loomed behind the figure, grotesque and shifting, like a nightmare breaking free from the confines of slumber. "Brace yourselves!" Sarah shouted as dread settled in the pit of her stomach. It felt as if everything was about to fall apart, and then came the roar, an unholy sound vibrating through the chasm, drowning out reason, hope, and their precious light. What had they truly awakened? And could this twisted reality swallow them whole? The earth shuddered beneath them, the roar echoing like a battle cry of everything that had been lost. "No!" Sarah yelled, her voice laced with sheer desperation. Holding her children tight, she braced against the rising tide of darkness. The grotesque shape loomed larger, hungry and twisted. Maddie whimpered, "Mom. What's happening?" "Stay close," Sarah pleaded, pulling them into a protective huddle. Jake squeezed her hand as tears streamed down his cheeks. In that moment, something broke within Sarah. Anger surged through her, the kind that fueled a mother's fierce determination to protect her children. "You want fear?" she shouted into the looming darkness. "Then let me show you strength. We're stronger than you'll ever know." The shadows recoiled slightly, as though her defiance caught them off guard. She could see flickers of light beginning to dance along her fingertips, a flickering flame igniting from the depths of her heart. The warmth spread slowly, pushing against the encroaching darkness. "Focus, kids," she urged, her voice steadying. "Imagine the park, the sun on your faces. Think of happy memories." The shadows twisted, their voices now a discordant symphony of hisses and mockery. But Sarah would not back down. "You may think you can control us, but fear is not your weapon. We'll turn that fear into light." As if answering her call, memories surged forth, moments of laughter, of joy, of simple, radiant love. The warmth grew, flooding her veins, enveloping her children as she shouted, "Together now. Light on three." The trio breathed deeply in unison, hearts pounding with shared purpose. 1, 2, 3. A brilliant light exploded from their joined hands, illuminating the shadows, peeling back layers of darkness like writhing snakes. The monstrous figure screeched, a sound that rattled through the air, furious and wild. "Lumen illuminate. Shadows recede." They chanted together, empowered. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in pain, consumed by their own fear of the light. "Keep it going," Sarah yelled, desperation giving way to conviction. But the twisted figure materialized again, its form shifting grotesquely. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning." It howled, its voice dripping with contempt, but Sarah's heart pulsed with defiance. "We are done running from you," she screamed. The earth shook beneath them, but the light surged brighter, a beacon against the oppressive dark. It was raw and fearless, reflecting the love that glued them together. "Think of your friends, your laughter, the beauty in life," Sarah shouted, anchoring her memories in the children's hearts. Light engulfed the space, pushing back against the malevolent force. As it did, she glimpsed histories woven into the darkness, lost souls trapped by their despair, by their own shadows. In that instant, she understood. Your power is built on fear, she declared, her voice unwavering. But we'll share our light with those you've consumed. In that moment, she reached out, calling on invisible connections, weaving light into the very fabric of the shadows. A change took place. Lures of darkness shifted, and for the first time, the shadows began to tear. Faces appeared, eyes pleading for salvation, reflections of those who were lost but could be found. Join us! Sarah bellowed, and with each echo of their rallying cries, the suffocation of dread began to loosen. They weren't just fighting the darkness within their fears, they were calling forth illumination to reclaim something precious. The monstrous form reeled, its voice splintering as pieces of its existence were unwoven by the light. No! This cannot be. But Sarah pressed on, hurling her love and determination against the entity. You are nothing but whispers in a storm. You can't consume us. With a final surge, the terrible figure exploded, dissolving into endless shadows that splintered like glass, shimmering in the light they had created. Suddenly, everything fell silent. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a soft glow that illuminated the remnants of Maplewood. Breathless, Sarah dropped to her knees, her children enveloping her in a tight embrace. They were alive, safe, and they had driven back the darkness together. We did it, Jake whispered, awe in his tone. Yes, Sarah sighed, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. Together. The shadows that had haunted Maplewood melted away into the dawn. The playground stood invitingly under the warm embrace of sunlight, laughter echoing faintly as if in celebration of their victory. The trees swayed softly, whispering the promise of new beginnings. Hand in hand, they stepped out into the world outside, reclaiming their home and the warmth of life, illuminated by the bonds of love and resilience. As they turned to leave behind the darkness, something shifted within Sarah. Maplewood held its stories of loss and despair, but now, it would also usher in rays of joy. And this time, they would always choose the light. But, dear friends, the ending doesn't stop here. If you like this thrilling journey, you need to subscribe immediately to join our community and experience more exclusive stories that will leave you breathless. Don't forget to smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let us know you want more heart-pounding tales. Make sure to flood the comments with your reactions and theories about the ending. Your thoughts mean the world, and I love hearing from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this tale ends. Only true fans realize how important it is to support our channel. Let us keep the stories alive.